thing with alcohol, right? It's tough to talk about because everybody's experience with it is so vastly, vastly different. What looks like misuse for one person might not look the same for someone else. Right? A lot of things factor in: your age, your weight, your height. These are all biological factors you can't control. That will vary how well your body is or is not able to process alcohol, grain alcohol, or like beer and all that kind of stuff. But it occurred to me, one of the things, even though I touch on alcohol in pretty much every episode of Comedy Centered, I have not gotten really super into what is the very dark side of it that can occur when you are using it really excessively for a long time. How do you know if the hangover is more than just a normal hangover? How do you know? It's kind of like, let me back it up a little bit. Have you ever had the instance where you weren't allergic to something and then all of a sudden you are? Like you were never bothered by ragweed or cats never bothered you. And then all of a sudden they did. Your body does that with a lot of things. And because alcohol is not something our body is supposed to actually ingest and actually supposed to process, it can vary so much, especially, and it looks different between genders too. It looks different. Acute alcohol withdrawal looks different in women than men. Can. So let's go over some of the symptoms, because some of the symptoms are very innocuous, and the more severe your symptoms are, the more likely that you could be in a situation where the healthiest and the safest thing for you to do is to medically detox. But symptoms that can fall within the realm of acute alcohol withdrawal: headaches. Now, these are some of the mild stage. There's 3 stages: mild, moderate, and severe. Okay, headaches, anxiety, tremors, handshakes. Have you ever had the shakes? Yeah. Mood changes. Sometimes we think when we're hungover we're in a bad mood just because our head hurts. No. The alcohol actually affects your hormone levels and a lot of different chemical compositions in your homeostasis. So that actually, the withdrawal of the alcohol is actually affecting your mood as well. You feel like crap, and you literally feel like crap. Gastrointestinal problems. Well, yeah. Of course. Everybody's had a gastrointestinal problem after drinking, right? Heart palpitations, increased blood pressure. So if you're someone who's taking blood pressure medication, if you have been diagnosed with high blood pressure, alcohol consumption can affect those levels and can affect that. And in actuality can work against the medication that you're taking. Hyperthermia. Well, in Wisconsin, right, we hear a lot about hypothermia. Hypothermia is when you're too cold. The body's too cold. Hyperthermia is an overheated body. Your body temperature is higher because your body's trying to flush out and deal with the alcohol. Much like your body raises its temperature when you have a fever because the fever is raising the body temperature to fight the infection. You get the idea, right? I will say, before moving on to this last symptom, that prior to 2022, when I first started walking down my path of trying to get in touch with my relationship with alcohol, where that came from and what was going on, right? And at that time, I was also suffering medical symptoms of what I would find out a year later was a necessary medical hysterectomy. But the hot flashes, when you get middle-aged and you're a woman, right, people talk about this all the time. In fact, it's so prevalent, the discussion of hot flashes. There's like t-shirts and little wine cooler, like wine koozies that you can buy. Oh, my hot flashes. I'm so hot, I come in flashes. It's an old joke. But hyperthermia is like a hot flash. And if you're losing sleep, if it's dysregulating your sleep, if you're being bothered on a regular basis because you're getting hot flashes, you may be equating that to maybe some premenopausal or menopausal situation or whatever circumstances. And in reality, it's the alcohol raising your actual blood and body, or your body temperature, your blood temperature. Your blood's boiling. See, again, great time to point out, not a doctor. Tiffany is not a doctor. Okay, the last one though, hallucinations and seizures. The 3 stages of withdrawal. If you have alcohol misuse or overuse, you have a habit of it, this 3 stages, mild, that's when you're going to be seeing more along the lines of headache, hand tremors, increased anxiety. It's not my word, but I've heard it referred to in recovery rooms as hangxiety. It's the hangover anxiety. And it's both. You have the anxiety, the social anxiety of, oh God, what did I say? Oh God, what did I do? But you also have higher levels of anxiety because your body is trying to flush out and reach homeostasis with all of that extra ethanol in your system, okay? So that's mild. Headaches, tremors, maybe a little shaky, right? Anxiety. Stage 2, which is considered moderate. That's where we're going to see the increase in blood pressure. You may have a smartwatch that can monitor your blood pressure. I'm curious about it. I don't drink anymore, but if you are someone who still, partakes in that, throw it on. Maybe measure. Maybe check to see what your blood pressure does after you've had some alcohol, right? But this is from withdrawal. So this wouldn't be happening necessarily while you're imbibing alcohol, but you would start seeing this up to like a few hours after you stop drinking all the way up. You can see the effects in your body up to 72 hours after you've stopped drinking in certain circumstances. So the 3rd stage, you can begin to experience visual and or auditory hallucinations. You can also begin to experience seizures. Now, the symptoms of these will start within 7 to 8 hours probably of you taking the last drink. Very often the pattern being, right, like you go to bed, you wake up the next morning, now your body has had enough time. It's moving the process of the alcohol along, and now you're really starting to feel some of those mild stage 1 withdrawal symptoms. Most people that don't chronically overuse or whatever, your withdrawal symptoms and your stages are going to stay within mild. You're going to feel maybe a little shaky, a little bit of a headache, a little bit of anxiety. Or a lot. The problem becomes if you aren't necessarily in a place yet, emotionally, where you understand what level you're currently drinking at. I lied to myself the most. I've shared this example many times, but I would buy a box of wine, right? First of all, it's cheaper, and you don't have to run to the store all the time, and the added bonus of buying box wine is when you throw it in the recycling, it doesn't make as much noise and let the neighbors know how many bottles of wine you're going through in a week. But when I would start, especially if I knew I had an unlimited amount of alcohol, I'm not really sure who shut off the lights some nights. I don't really know. How I would know, I would wake up on the couch or I'd wake up in my bed, I'd go into the kitchen, and I'd pick up the box of wine and see how heavy it was. I went, woo, damn, we drank like a pound and a half last night, right? And that's not ounces, that's not how you necessarily measure alcohol, but I am someone who could tell roughly how things weigh, right? And I'm like, hey, this is not as heavy as when I walked it in the door yesterday. And because I lived alone, there was no one else to blame it on. There was no one else to say, oh, well, you had a lot last night, right? So before I started in on my recovery journey, I don't remember ever having any visual, like auditory or hallucinations or any of that kind of stuff. But honestly, what I know of, sometimes in life there are invisible lines to get crossed. And as we grow, the decisions we make, the older we get, the more serious some of these consequences become. And life is designed that way. When we're younger, the consequences a lot of times hopefully aren't as immediate. But as we get older, the health consequences, the habits, the choices and all that stuff, they only become more narrow, right? So it got me thinking, like, if you're someone who lives alone, no one's observing your alcohol behavior but you, you're not necessarily a good judge of your own use because you're not watching yourself with accurate eyes. A, when you're under the influence, but B, when you're in those in-between hours where you're just trying to recoup so you can kind of drink again, right? What you're trying to do is forget what you just did. Forget all that stuff you said last night. Let's forget all that, right? And The other thing that I want to caution people on as well is that often when these symptoms rear their head, the more dangerous and the more the scarier symptoms, the more severe symptoms, it won't necessarily rear its head for 24 to 72 hours after you've had your last drink. So if you are used to consuming large quantities of alcohol per day, and I'm going out on a little bit of a limb. This is from my own personal experience. Again, not a medical doctor or professional. I would imagine where you see people fall into the severe category more frequently is when there's a lot of overuse of hard alcohol. So if you're a person who's going through a fifth of alcohol in a day, making cocktails or whatever, or more than that, even though you may not be drinking that many more technical drinks than someone else, hard alcohol, grain alcohol is a lot more difficult for your body to process. And I'm not trying to say like drink wine instead and it's fine. Alcohol is just ethanol that you're drinking. Okay? Really beat that one to death, didn't I? I bring this up not to make anybody feel bad. I raise these issues only for the fact of, I think it bears mentioning as we're starting to look at our relationship with everything in our life. Alcohol is just another relationship, right? And as we've, explored a lot in the past, generally speaking, when someone reverts on a regular basis to alcohol use to combat things that are going on in their real life, it's because that became a problem-solving technique earlier on in life. Right? There's too much tension in my life. There's too much stress. I can't handle it. I'm just going to drink a bottle of wine and check out for a little while, right? And you can do this for a long period of time and not necessarily feel any real consequences physically in that. But that type of logic doesn't carry forward. That does not mean that is going to continue to be that way. And why does it affect us the way that it does? Why does detoxifying from alcohol? What's the chemistry and the science behind it? So I'm not going to go super deep, right? But when you're drinking, there are these things that, and the abbreviation is called GABA. There are GABA, GABA receptors and glutamate receptors, I think I'm saying that right, in your brain. Okay? So when you're drinking alcohol, this slows the brain down. It affects these receptors. And that's what produces the feeling in your body of, just that relax, that sedation, that, because you can feel, at least for me, when that first, it's almost as if I only ever needed that first sip of wine. That first sip is like the best one, because I would I would feel literally almost like my nervous system was lighting up with electricity, like bing, 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 bing. Like those stoplight things that go up when someone's going to drag race, like, here we go. Yeah. So, speaking about the GABA receptors, right? So it slows the brain down. If you're drinking alcohol on a regular basis, and on a regular basis, your GABA receptors and the glutamate receptors in your body are having to adjust themselves to offset the alcohol consumption. That will alter over time how your brain is functioning, right? It makes sense if it's constantly having to be obsessed with that. So when someone abruptly stops drinking alcohol, that is when it becomes medically dangerous. Alcohol is the only drug that I'm aware of at all that can kill you during the detox process. Detoxing from heroin will not kill you. You'll feel like it is what I hear, but detoxing from, think of some of the worst drugs, crack cocaine, things like that. Those are all going to be horrible, 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 unpleasant experiences. You're going to feel like it, but you're not in physical danger, medical danger. Alcohol, you are. And that's because of these receptors. When you take and you yank that alcohol out, when you've been misusing for so long, you send everything haywire. Your brain and your body chemistry has had to do so much manipulation on the back end to enable the continuation of that drinking. When you pull it all the way out, your brain chemistry, your body chemistry, your hormone levels, they're just all over the place. This is what can lead to the seizures. This is what can lead to the more fatal and devastating consequences of alcohol use. So, the seizures, you're at the highest chance of them between 24 and 48 hours after the last drink. So there are medical detox programs. I'm not tone deaf. I know most people cannot afford to go and get medically detoxed. However, I encourage you to go online. If you feel like during your personal detox you're starting to experience some of these things, what should you do and when? If it's something and you know you've been going hard at it for like 10 years and you drink every day and you go through a pint every day and then you're just going to stop, do not do that alone. Do not do that alone. Do not do that completely unsupervised. Maybe you can't afford a medical person. Okay, then have a friend come over. Have someone watch you. Because it isn't going to be until a day or two in where you're going to hit it. The guy I dated in college, who was really the first love of my life, we went out for 5 years. He almost died. Alcohol. Overuse, right? And it was funny because, so he had had some warning shots. We usually get these in life. There's things, there's signs, and sometimes we see those signposts and we stop and go, hey, I'm going to go a different direction. And sometimes we just keep going our same direction right past that signpost. Well, in this person's particular situation, he had had a close call a few months before the big problem. He was at home with his girlfriend at the time, was talking mid-sentence, had been drinking had been drinking, vodka was the thing. He had pounded quite a bit, and he just collapsed in front of her on the floor. Mid-sentence. She calls 911, they bring him the ambulance, they detox him in the hospital, they send him home. Probably a week or two later, right? So, a friend, because we're all friends from college, I went down to go visit and just see how he was doing and how things were going and that. And he asked me to give him a ride to the liquor store because he didn't have his car. Now, I'm still drinking at this point. And I thought, this is not a good idea to give him alcohol. He just got out, a week ago. But then I had to remember something. I'm not giving him alcohol. He's giving himself alcohol. Where he lived was 6 blocks away from the liquor store. If he wanted it, he was going to walk there. He told me as much. He said, I've decided I'm not done and I'm going to drink and there's nothing you can do to stop me. And he's right. There isn't. So, I wasn't really sure what to do with all that, but the man in his late 40s, you're allowed to do what you want to do. So I dropped him off, got his stuff, brought him back to the house, but I hung out. I wanted to make sure, and then I waited around until the girlfriend came home so that there could be someone there. And then I didn't hear anything for several months. Anytime I spoke or text, everything was fine. Close call, not great, learned some lessons, getting better. We hear that a lot, right? Fast forward, the next call I get is that he's in the ICU in St. Paul. And he is in a medical coma. He is, or he's in a coma, I'm sorry. He is completely non-responsive. They're not sure when they can move him from the ICU. So we all go and gather around, right? He didn't leave that ICU for a month. He was in the ICU for 1 month. His kidneys were shutting down. His liver was shutting down. Everything was starting to close up. And almost died. Now, the good news is that time is stuck. And he doesn't drink anymore. But he also never went to therapy. He never went to AA. And he's never sought any group therapy or any assistance with coping, with how to deal with life without that tool. And so you may have heard this expression before in casual language, but someone who's a dry drunk. It's somebody who no longer drinks alcohol, but still exhibits a lot of the personality traits of somebody who's chronically using alcohol. And sadly, that's kind of where we're at, and it's been difficult to maintain a friendship with him now, which is kind of sad because he's sober and I'm sober. And it would be nice to have a sobriety buddy, but he's not really willing to look at any of the underlying stuff. Also, because I'm a stand-up comedian, I've also lost a lot of friends to drugs and alcohol way too soon. Very, very, very funny, very talented, very smart people. But this stuff is deadly serious. And sometimes we just have to say that it is. And sometimes we just have to stop pretending like everything's a party, because it's not. Everything isn't St. Patrick's Day. Also, fun fact about St. Patrick, a lot of people don't know. St. Patrick was very anti-slavery. He was enslaved as a young man. Yep. Very against slavery. Love that. Little fun fact. So now, I've ruined everybody's good time. See, this is why I don't get invited to parties, y'all. Great, Tiff. Tell us about how we're all going to die from having fun. But I only say this never with judgment, only with love, and only in the spirit of, hey, the more you know, and also to, anytime you feel like you're in a situation no one's ever been in, that could be true, but more than likely it isn't. And there is support for anybody who wants it. It is out there if you need it. There are national hotlines, local hotlines, and also too here on the Cadre app. I'm on there, Tiffany Norton Comedy Centered. If you have questions about anything I've presented, you can always pop in the comments and leave me something. I do check those out. So, all right, Comedy Centered, have a great Sunday. Enjoy. Have some corned beef and cabbage. Have some soda bread. And enjoy the beautiful weather for St. Patrick's Day tomorrow.